The first position that we're going to study is the one in which the queen is fighting with the two rooks. Technically speaking, the queen is about equal to the two rooks, even though 5 plus 1 should be 10 and should be slightly better than 9. But in most of the cases, the queen is strong enough to fight with the rooks. However, towards the end game, the strength of the rooks is increased, and the first and the foremost thing that you need to know when playing with the rooks is that you're usually looking for endgames. The reason for that is that in the endgames there are too many open files. On the open files, the rooks can play together as a team, which is not so easy for the queen. She's pretty much alone. And especially if there are too many weak pawns, like it is in this case that we are looking at the moment. The game Shurov against Anand from the Linares tournament 1998. Then the rooks are much better than the queen. And Anand, who was playing here with the black pieces, he considered this position to be technically won for him, albeit with some difficulties. You will see how exactly he is working on winning the weaknesses. So first of all, in that situation, queen b1 was played. Shurov is looking for some ways to attack the enemy pawns, and he wants to take the most dangerous one on a7. Anand reacted with rook d8, which is not the only move in this situation. Instead of that, he could have also played rook d to c5 and to go for the pawn on c3. This is also a good plan. Then the move e6, which is something that white is always looking for, to try to clear the road to the enemy king and to try to do a perpetual check, is not really working here because black can first of all take on h5, and after king g1 he can also take the pawn on e6, and queen g6 would be answered rook e5 just in time, and there is no perpetual check. So this is probably also one position for black, but on the second move here, white can also defend with queen b8, and this is more stubborn defense. After rook c8, queen takes a7, and rook takes c3, the game would be probably, will continue in a similar way to the one that we're about to see after rook d8. So rook d8, Anand is securing the back rank. He knows that this pawn has nowhere to go, and little by little he will take them. Shurov answers with queen b7. Rook takes c3, one is going down, queen takes a7, and now note the following move, rook c to c8. The 8th rank is secured. That pawn is never going to be promoted anymore because the rooks are having good control, and this is one of the good features of the rooks. Together they can stop any pawn if it is alone. The queen cannot give enough support, but also the rooks intend to attack the enemy pawns now, the one on e5 and the one on a2 with rook d5 or rook e8, so the two rooks can be coordinated, and also rook e8 followed by rook d2 to take the other pawn. This is another idea, and it's very hard for white to meet these threats. a4 was played, rook e8, queen c7. This is the best defense. The queen is hitting one of the rooks, and thus it is not allowing the other one to become too active. For the time being, white has defended the pawn on a4 because of this idea. Rook d to c8. Also the best reaction by Anand, because if he goes for the pawn with rook d4, we will see a typical idea for white, the one that we were talking about before that. Queen c6 not only attacks the rook, but after rook takes a4, he wants to play e6 and to discover this king. He's getting rid of one of his weak pawns as well. Black has to take it, but after queen takes e6, the arising position would be a draw. The pawns are on the same flank. If black tries somehow to double the rooks to attack the pawn on g2, then white is going to do a perpetual check on the e8 and g6 squares. So therefore black has to be careful, and he correctly plays rook d to c8, trying to get rid of this queen. Queen b7. The same idea again. The queen is hitting the rook on a8 and the one on c8. Once again, black doesn't have time to take the pawn on a4. Rook e8 controls the pawn, and once again the pawn on a4 is hanging. Shirov continues with the same idea, queen c6. Once again he is hitting the rooks. The other thing that he could do in this position was to try and to sacrifice the pawn at once with the move e6. But okay, in that case we will have another typical situation, a situation in which the rooks also have a pass pawn to protect and to work with. And this is extremely bad for the queen, especially if the queen is forced to block the pawn. Then usually the winning method, we're also going to see it in the next example, is to try to advance the pawn as far as possible. One of the rooks is standing behind the pawn, while the other one is free to grab material on the other side of the board, or it is also trying to unblock that pawn by attacking the queen in front of it. In case of e6 here, f takes e6, queen b5, the game can continue with e5, and the pawn is moving. And the best defense for white would be to try to block it with the king, and to leave the queen working. The stronger piece is usually working in these situations, the weaker one is trying to block. King f2, e3 check, king e2, and now rook a b8, or immediately rook a d8. Both of these moves should be good enough to win the game. Check, king h8, queen c6. The same method as before, the queen is hitting the rook, thus trying not to let this rook to become too active. The other moves wouldn't help neither. Say queen c3 would be answered rook d8, followed by rook d2. The pawn would be blocked and it would be ready to step one row further, and after that again we are trying to unblock it with the rook coming on d1. Say e5, check, king d2. Okay, first of all we can also win the pawn on g2 if we like, or we can after rook e2 we can try to push the pawn and then promote it. While if on move number 13 he goes a5 immediately, white goes a5 immediately, then we have rook b2 check, king e1, and the pawn is already on the second rank. Next, rook b1 is coming, and there is nothing that white can do to stop this idea, because there is also another rook on the board which is heading for the first rank, and after that the pawn will be promoted, so it might be even checkmate like it is here, as you can see it. And finally, after queen c6, we have rook b2 check, king e1. There is no time for us to push the pawn because our rook is hanging, but okay, we can do rook d8, and with the same idea, e2, followed by rook d1, and black is winning in that case too. So therefore, Shirov defended with queen c6. Once again, the same method, hitting the rooks. But now, Anand plays rook a c8. He is attacking the queen and he is attacking the pawn. Queen b7 was played. Queen d7 was played. Note that queen b7 would lose the game because of rook c5, and already the pawn is lost. And then the other one would be lost very soon. So queen d7. And now rook c to d8. And with this careful maneuvering, black finally got rid of the queen, which was constantly attacking the rooks. Because now if queen to b5, he will go rook e6. This rook is no longer under attack, so he has time to maneuver, to double the rooks, and to start taking the weak pawns. For instance, after a5, not only that he can go for that pawn, but first of all he will probably go for the more dangerous one, the one on the a file with rook e8, followed by rook a6. He will take it, and then he will come back for the one on e6. And there is nothing that the lonely queen can do about that. We see in this line the rook cooperation in pure form. Okay, so instead of queen going to b7, Shirov decided to defend the pawn on e5 with queen c7. But now we have rook d5, a5, and that pawn goes away. So there is no danger of e6 anymore, and now the rooks can go for the a pawn. White is using the time to try and to push it as far as possible. Then we have rook e7, queen c6, The pawn is very dangerously close to the promotional square, but after the next move, things are becoming clear. Black is hiding the rook on f8, and next he wants to play rook a7, followed by rook a8, and to take the pawn on a6. A very simple and careful work, and at the end of the day, all the pawns have been lost. The game also continued. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention that here the other moves are not really working. If you're trying to defend the rooks like that with king f8, then queen d6 is unpleasant, and there is nothing that black can do but to repeat the moves. And if instead of that, if rook d8 is played, intending the same thing, then white, as usual, is disturbing the rooks with the move queen to b6. But after rook f8, there is no salvation for the second player. The game continued king h3 or queen c5. Queen c5 wouldn't help neither, because this time the rook is going on d7, and well, next rook e8 followed by rook a7 is coming, and it will lead to the same thing. King h3 was answered rook a7, g4, rook f to a8, king h4. That pawn also went outside the board. Queen b7, rook a5, queen c6. You remember this method with the rook going on f8, don't you? Here too it is working. Rook to f8. The rook is hiding itself next to the king, and after that what black wants to prepare is rook g5 followed by f5 to get rid of this pawn. He wants to take after that with the rook, and to take one more pawn, the one on h5, and after that with the two passers together with the two rooks, he is easily winning. This is how the game ended. Queen b6, rook g5, queen to b3, one last attempt to stop the pawn, king h8, queen b4, rook e8, queen a4, rook d8, so the queen can no longer attack the rook, queen to e4, and f5 finally has been played. White took it and resigned after rook to f8. The plan is like we mentioned before: rook takes f5, then rook takes h5, and then black has a choice. Either he can go and he can try to play for mate with the rooks coming, with the rook on h5 coming back on g5, then rook f6, then rook g6, and rook h5, or he can start advancing his pawns carefully on the king side. In any case, he's already 2 pawns ahead. If you consider that at the starting position he was a pawn down with the rooks, this time he did. You can see how much great work he did with the rooks, and this was the moment in which he should have resigned.